There we go. So this Dr. Matt this week is a psychologist and also a therapist and all sorts of other things, and just actually an overall great guy. So like I said, he has recorded a video for us. It's called Riding Out the Storm, and it's on dealing with um, deep or I don't want to use the word extreme, but I'm tired and that's the word that's in my brain right now. Reactions in gifted and twice exceptional kids and kind of riding out the storm. That's what it's called. So what we can do to support our twice exceptional kids when they're in those moments of absolute intensity. Um, and no worries, people come logged into their names weirdly all the time. As long as you put your name on attendance, I'll assume you were here. So yeah, so anyway, so Dr. Matt is going to do that for us, and that's why we have that short video. What I'm going to do is go through a couple of short presentations today on social emotional learning for twice exceptional kids. I am also going to touch real quick before we get into that on the big, quote unquote, big assignment, because I know I mentioned it last week. I'm in the middle of tweaking it some. You guys do have until the end of April to do all this, so you're not actually losing any time. What I have found in the past is that sometimes I put the assignment up in the beginning of the class to give people time to kind of read through it and all. And inevitably, I have a chunk of folks who do the assignment and turn in the assignment before we've done half the class. And so I want to make sure you guys get information before you are attempting the assignment. So I am holding off a little bit. And then part of the assignment, we have a guest speaker who actually developed the initial framework that we're working on, who's actually going to come in and speak as one of our guest speakers. 99% of the time, unless she gets COVID, Claire doesn't get sick, and so she won't be sick for us. But she will talk through not only the background on how we came about, or how she came about with the framework and the pieces that actually MCPS teachers contributed to the final published version of it. But she also is going to do, I believe, some work with you guys on how to use AI effectively to better differentiate your lesson plans, which is what the crux of the assignment is going to be based around. So I'm holding off on it for a reason. And if I put it up and it's half finished, it looks really scary. So I'm not trying to take away time from you guys, but I am trying to give you a more solid foundation before I throw that assignment at you. And with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Let's do this. Yeah, because I got a whole bunch of things going on here. All right, I think you can see my purple social emotional learning thing. Is that what you guys think you see too? Fantastic. So yeah, so this is a presentation that I will post after, like I usually do. It's got a whole bunch of things built into it. So I'm going to talk a little bit through it. I'm going to talk a little bit around it, and then there's going to be some pieces for you guys to do. I actually restructured the assignment that went with this, in that there is no more assignment that goes with it because it was kind of clunky and wasn't getting what I wanted it to get. So I'd rather you guys get something out of this. So for this first part here, we are going to kind of do some basics on the social emotional learning needs of our twice exceptional kids. A couple of them I'm going to go into depth around. And basically I'm going to until about 8:15. And then instead of taking our break like we usually do, I'm just going to let you guys go. Hopefully by then the other video will be posted so you can actually watch Dr. Matt's speech tonight if that's the time you have set aside for it. Or if you, like me, don't feel good and you're just done for the day, you can watch it at another point. So overall, we want to talk about some of the myths that go around with our gifted kids. I think one of the things that as I do more and more research, as I immerse myself more and more into our world of gifting twice exceptional kids, I feel like more than almost any other population out there, almost everything lay people know about these kids is based on myth and perpetuated by myth. because a lot of times the word gifted in and of itself, it sounds like a present, it sounds like a happy thing. And so immediately when you think one person has a gift, then there's like this sense of, well, I don't have a gift. What we know as we learn more and more about gifted people and gifted children is that it's not really a gift like a present, it's just how it is labeled. And like everything else, labels come with benefits and challenges. One thing I really like with the presentation you'll see with Dr. Matt today is that he really goes into the brain differences, but in like lay terms. So like my science teachers, yeah, I'm sure you'll get it. But those of us who are not science folks, he explains it in a way that science people, non-science people can understand too. Um, but I appreciate him talking through how gifted brains are different. And, you know, gifted kids are different. Twice exceptional kids are gifted, are different on two different ends of a spectrum. Um, and because of all of this, one of the big areas that gets overlooked with our gifted and twice exceptional kids are their social emotional needs. Matt will take us through talking about how, unlike other groups of children, almost everything gifted kids do goes through the emotional circuitry, whether or not emotions seem to be any way, shape, or form involved in what it is that they're doing. So I think that's going to be a really important thing to kind of frame out some of the work that we're going to do today and why we're talking about that. So I'm going to read this real quick, just because it's up on the screen, so I might as well, right? So the myth, however, that gifted students are good students and will succeed easily is still alive and well. As one teacher writes, if you want gifted kids to be successful, you must believe that gifted education is exceptional education. Many teachers do extraordinary things to help students with learning disabilities be successful. However, when it comes to students who are gifted, some teachers are inflexible and resentful of the behaviors characteristic of being gifted. Not a week goes by when one of my students' regular education teachers doesn't give me an earful about my students' lack of organizational skills, continuous questioning of authority, or underachievement. I do understand their frustrations. However, these behaviors are actually characteristics of gifted children. Simply put, gifted students have exceptional needs with exceptional gifts, with their exceptional gifts. Treating gifted students as exceptional education students goes a long way towards meeting their needs. In all honesty, simply remembering that they are exceptional education students can make your days with this difficult population more pleasant. And that really is the crux of it, is that gifted kids are not what we think they are. And therefore twice exceptional kids aren't what we think they are. I'm going to play, this is a pretty short video. I'm going to play for us. I'm really going to hope the sound works.
So we tend to think of special needs
Can you guys
and
hear it?
gifted as opposites. One needs a lot of support, and the other, they can take care of themselves, right? Even the word gifted implies special. Why would they need anything more? But what if I told you that kids who fall in the category of gifted face even more challenges than kids who don't? My son, when he was 2, taught himself to read. When he was 4, taught himself multiplication. By the time he was 6, he knew more about astronomy than I will ever know. Great, right? But at the same time, he couldn't stand to wear hats on his head, and he couldn't stand to be in loud noises, and he couldn't stand to go outside because the wind on his face was too much. I thought it was kind of funny, but didn't know what else to do about it. Didn't know what to do about it until we started having problems, and we started having a lot of problems at school. You see, he was at a religious school, and we were told that when the kids were saying the prayers, he would put his hands over his ears. And we were told that's not okay. In fact, he started getting into trouble, started getting into a lot of trouble. But we didn't realize that it was related. Not at that point. See, it turns out that kids who process information at high speeds also tend to process sensory information at high speeds. They'll hear things louder than most. They'll feel things on their skin more intensely. They can feel emotions super intensely, and they can feel an intense desire to jump and move about. These are the kids that need to cut the tags out of the back of their shirts or can't wear socks with seams on them. It's also related to asthma and allergies. So, you know that image we have of the nerdy kid with the inhaler? Turns out there's a reason for it. So Kazimierz Dabrowski, he studied this population and he found that he divided into 5 categories: so psychomotor, sensual, imaginational, intellectual, and emotional. So these kids, they're feeling things really intensely. And sometimes in order to slow down the bombardment of data coming their way, they can move slowly or try to process things more slowly and seem like they're just not getting it as much. But the opposite is actually the truth. So they can actually be diagnosed with autism. And when in reality, that's not the case at all. An interesting thing about these kids as well, we tend to think of gifted as kids being good at everything across the board, right? If you're gifted, you're strong all around. But in reality, it's not the truth. What's more likely is this profile here, where we have a spiky profile. It's also known as asynchrony. So they can be really good at certain things and really bad at others. The problem is that most schools, they don't really know what to do with kids who at 8 years old are working on middle school level math, but their handwriting is barely legible. And for the kids, it can be kind of tough too, because they want to talk to their friends about what they're interested in, right? But nobody else seems to get what they're talking about. In the case of my son, at 4 years old, he was obsessed with circulatory systems. Not a lot of 4-year-olds know what circulatory systems are all about. So they can withdraw. And Dabrowski calls this his theory of positive disintegration, with the fact that we have to close off one.
I'm going to pause right there. Positive disintegration theory is fascinating. Don't try and understand it on the first day. It took me years to figure out it was fascinating because there's just so many pieces to it. I'm going to hold us off right there and move forward, but I do encourage you guys to go back and listen to the rest of this. Which one does this take me to? Oh, good. It's the one I thought it did. No, JK. I love it when I embed things and then I lose them and I'm not sure if I'm going to where I want to go, but it is. So we're going to take a little side trip right now and talk about some of these social emotional needs a little more specifically. So we've said this a couple of times, common behaviors in gifted children can often be misinterpreted as symptoms of attention problems or other problems, but truly they're in the normal range of behavior for gifted children. So just to give you guys a little bit of framework on this does not all come magically out of my head or anywhere else. It actually is grounded in both professional standards and research. So the first thing we have up here is CASEL, and CASEL stands for something. SEL is the social emotional learning. So much like in education where we have standards, in the world of social emotional learning, they have competencies. And CASEL is this group that has done all this work, and they've come up with 5 competencies, which are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And so when we think about social emotional learning, we want to tie it to one of these 5 areas of learning. At the same time, the National Association for Gifted Children does have program standards, instructional standards, and teacher prep and advanced teacher standards. But within their programming standards, they cover social emotional learning under 4 of the 6 areas of instruction. And so in those areas, we talk about self-understanding, awareness of needs, cognitive and affective growth, personal, social, and cultural competence, coordination of services, and socio-emotional development. And then even in MCPS, we have this kind of, I'm going to go with competencies under the Be Well 365. Thank you, Janine. I knew somebody would look it up for me. Be Well 365. And so if you look at what MCPS has as our social emotional standards, you can see how they align really with CASEL, but also with some of these other areas. So talking about being positive members of community, managing emotions, building resiliency, identifying support for themselves and friends, which then also interprets that they have friends, peacefully resolving conflict and making positive decisions. So one of the things that Castle does, see, look, I even have it on the screen. One of the things that Castle does for us is defines that SEL should be considered an integral part of all education and not just kind of a sidebar or something that we add on to it. So one thing that I hope I will do, not tonight, but at some point, is talk about how we can loop more social emotional learning into the work that we do. But I think the other thing that's important, and one thing I try to teach us to do, is to identify when we're doing social emotional learning when we don't realize that we're doing it. Because a lot of times what I think people think is, a social emotional learning has to be its own thing, its own lesson. You have to have your own objective on the board. But truly, there's a lot of work that we do as teachers that is social emotional learning. But if it's clear to us that it's social emotional learning and we make it clear to the kids, it makes it more effective. It doesn't mean you're doing anything different. It means you're naming the practice that you're doing. So this is a fun little graphic, and if you go on their website, it actually moves. And I think if I click this, it will take us to their website. So, oh, I know. So this is another little video. I have a bunch of things I want to get us to today, but I do encourage you guys, like I said, to go back and spend some time in this. One thing that I will tell you is from my own personal experience is don't try to learn all these things at once because your head will explode. Instead, either pick one area that you're comfortable with and learn more about it, or pick an area that you feel that is your greater area of weakness and dive in there first. Because if it's in the middle and you feel lukewarm about it, you're not going to get all that much out of it. So I either say start strong or start weak, and go from there. Awesome. So each of these different areas within Castle has their own little video that kind of talks us through what it is that they're looking at. So again, pick one, maybe two areas and kind of go into them. But overall, what they do is they lay a foundation for what it is that we're looking for to help develop in our students so that when we talk about things like self-management, what are we really talking about? So self-awareness, I think, is one of the more obvious ones, in that it talks really about self-perception, your own emotions, your confidence, your self-efficacy, like just all the things all about me. Self-management, this is really where a lot of the focus of executive functioning, when we talk about executive functioning, sometimes people mix it up as a form of just organization, and organization is a piece of it. But depending on who you're reading, when you talk about executive functioning, you're talking about between 10 and 14 different areas of areas of need, areas of whatever it is that your brain is doing. So when we talk about self-management as one of those areas, that includes things, yes, organization, but it also includes impulse control, stress management, self-discipline, motivation, and then within goal setting, and this is where things break down sometimes, because part of goal setting, of course, is also prioritizing and, making decisions, creating hierarchies. They're all things that are really difficult. They're really difficult for a lot of people, but they're especially difficult if you have executive functioning disabilities. They all fall into that same kind of range. The next three areas, the social awareness, relationship skills, and the responsible decision making, again, we can see how they all kind of link together. But when we break them out, when we're talking social awareness, we're talking about that awareness of others, which includes things like empathy and perspective taking. Relationship skills really talks about not just having empathy, but then being able to interact and socialize with other people, being able to be a part of a team. So it's not always just about being friends or building a relationship, but building working relationships and being able to be a part of something that is greater than yourself. And then the responsible decision-making piece, again, another big part of the executive functioning, because you're having to really break down problems and weigh choices and then make decisions. And so those are all part of that greater responsible decision-making piece. So again, I do encourage you to go in and watch the little videos. They're all really between 2 and 5 minutes long. But I think they're a really great way to kind of introduce the concepts. I'm just going to touch on this piece a little bit, and then I'm not going to actually show us this video right now. But in this video, this little boy and several others are talking about this concept of future self. And the reason that it's important to think about the concept of future self is that students students go to school because they have to. You know, if we gave them a choice, very few of our kids are going to choose to come to school every day. Um, One of the things that we also kind of know from all of this is that when students don't feel that part of themselves, they don't feel part of something greater, what they also lose a disconnect with is their future self. And it's actually something we want to start asking them about as young as possible, because students are more likely to dedicate themselves to their learning, to these skills, to any of this, if they can see a future for themselves. And so, you know, if we're talking about college or career in 11th grade, we're too late, because they're not driven to participate, because they don't see anything after that, after they're handed a schedule, after they're told where they're going every day. There can be a sense of loss because they don't have any idea of what that's going to look like. And a lot of times for our gifted and our twice exceptional kids, it's especially true because they either get into their head that they're only good at school, or they're really smart, but they're not good at school. And what else could there possibly be for them? And even though we know most of them are much more successful in college than they are in K-12, if they don't have that sense of being able to move forward, they're not going to be able to do so. So part of what our responsibility becomes is helping them develop that sense of future self. So like I said, most of our NAGC standards do have social emotional learning components to them. I am not going to read them all to you, but I am going to kind of bounce through. Under learning and development, we talk about self-understanding and awareness of need. We also talk about the cognitive and affective growth. When we talk about curriculum instruction, so again, this is about the actual act of teaching. We talk about talent development, which really means helping students find both their areas of natural talent and also areas where we could potentially develop talent or develop interest into talent, and putting some effort into that. One of the big pieces with our twice exceptional and our gifted learners is teaching them instructional strategies to become independent learners. One of the big misunderstandings, you know, a lot of times they'll tell us, you know, gifted kids will be fine, or, you know, they'll be fine on their own, or have them research something of interest to them. I love researching things of interest to me, but if weren't taught research skills, there's a big difference between going down the rabbit hole and research. And anybody who has gone on a wiki walk before knows this, right? Um, we want to teach the kids the skills to be independent investigators and not just assume that because they're interested in something, they're going to figure it out. I saw a meme the other day, which could have been yesterday or 6 weeks ago. I have no idea. But I saw a meme the other day that was like, I want to learn more skills to better manage my ADHD, and now I'm an expert on Mesopotamia. And that's about accurate, right? That's not really research, that's going down the rabbit hole. So we want to make sure that we're actually teaching our gifted and twice exceptional kids strategies. We know culturally relevant curriculum and helping them prepare for that broader world. Um, Personal competence, social competence, cultural competence. This all goes back out to what we were just talking about with the castle skills. Leadership is a big part of this. And we know with our twice exceptional kids, especially, a lot of them have a lot of natural leadership talent, and they will use those leadership skills for good or for evil, depending on their mood, if we don't teach them to cultivate them and really put them in a direction that's meaningful. Um, you know, they are the kids who are going to get the class going. They are the kids who are going to draw people in. They are the ones who might sit in the back of the room and cause problems, or they might really get other kids to engage. We want to give them the skills or help them develop the skills to be effective and positive with that. Um, Variety of programming, coordinating services. So again, just like we do with special education or any of our other types of students with needs, gifted students have needs and they need services, both social, emotional, and academic, to meet those needs. And the last piece of this that I really like with the programming standards is there's one in programming for gifted children. There's a whole section on professional development, because it is important that teachers of the gifted are also learners themselves. You don't have to be gifted to teach gifted kids, but you do have to be interested in learning. You have to be able to accept that a lot of your students are probably going to be smarter than you are. It's just how it is. It's a hard thing to accept. And honestly, if you are gifted, your gifted kids are probably still smarter than you are because at their age, they have a lot more neural pathways. They haven't pruned them down as much as you have as an older person. And so while gifted kids do prune off pathways faster than any other um, brain type out there, they still have more of them when they're young. They're more open to ideas and they are actually better at making sometimes wilder, but sometimes better connections. And so we have to be open to that. And if you are somebody who's going to struggle with a 5-year-old who can outthink you, you're not going to be the best gifted teacher there is. But whether or not you're gifted doesn't actually matter. It's the willingness to learn, it's the interest in being a lifelong learner, and it's the willingness to engage in practices that will make learning better for your students that become the important part of being a teacher of gifted and twice exceptional kids. We talked about this. I'm going to skip through it. So one thing I really like also to talk about, and I actually saw something about this the other day where it had commented on there was commentary on a person with autism being either high functioning or highly disabled, and I just nails on chalkboard because giftedness, like everything else, is a spectrum. Autism is on a spectrum, ADHD is on a spectrum, and giftedness is on the spectrum. And I had seen a graphic like this a couple of years ago, which I felt like did a lot better job of kind of explaining what is the spectrum of all of these different needs. So, for lack of a better visual, because I like visuals, if I want to talk about kind of where our kids are, I want to look at this like, unless if you don't remember because you're too young to know, this is one of those old school like fader boards where you're bringing in different lights or volumes or whatever. But the idea is that the intensity of things changes as you go up and down the board. And then the what you're talking about goes across the board as well, like goes this way across the board. And so if we think about what we would term as a range of typical behavior, I don't want to use the word normal, but more like neurocentric behavior. We're going to look at these two pink bands right here. Is that more like typical range, meaning that anything that falls outside of that range is less typical. It's either going to be more intense or less intense, but it's not within that typical range. And so if we think of a more typical student, we have a student with some highs and we have a student with some lows, but for the most part, everything's falling within these bands. And that makes sense for the majority of our students, right? Like some are really good at some things, they're not so good at other things, but for the most part, they're pretty typical students and they do what we expect students to do, which is also probably to do the unexpected, but within that range. This could be another example of a student, right? We see, some relatively high areas, no real low areas, pretty typical high performing kid, we might call this as well. Then we have a student who has a lot of things that fall in this really high upper range. But what we note here also is that while there's nothing that falls in this lower range at the bottom here, we still have some lows within the student. And so what we call these are relative weaknesses. Because while this box right here might be typical for a typical student within the classroom, for a student who has all of these highs up here, this is a significant difference. And the difference between these two boxes here is similar to the difference between, say, these two boxes here, even though this one is right on the cusp and this one is just a little bit below. But within a student, so this becomes an area of relative weakness for them. And it's important because these are our students who we would typically say, oh, they're so quick on this and they're quick on that. I can't understand why they don't ever know where any of their papers are. Well, this is why they don't know where any of their papers are, because for them, it's an area of relative weakness. And it's important, again, to remember that when we talk about those spiky profiles, like our speaker had earlier on, this is what we're talking about. Then we have this friend here. Let's see, do I have one more? I do. We have this friend here who again has not only high highs and relative highs, but also relative lows and true lows. And so this again is going to be a student who is likely highly gifted in multiple areas, but also has areas where they do struggle, and then they have areas where they really struggle. A lot of times I would anticipate that a student with a profile like this probably tends to have more social weaknesses, um, or they're a student who's, say, really, really high in math, but maybe has a reading disability. And so they're very low in a particular area, but very high in another particular area. So again, it's that spiky profile, but the spikes are more concentrated and the lows are more concentrated. And do understand, if you didn't already, I completely made up these boxes. This is all illustrative. So then we have this friend here. These are the friends I usually get to play with. So these are our friends who not only do they have high highs and low lows, but they have some pretty extreme lows and some pretty extreme highs. And these are the kids that often people just don't know what to do with. These are the kids, like I spoke to a school team today, where in truth and honesty, is the seventh grader probably should be going into high school last year. We might be pushing the child to high school next year. We'll see. At the same time, the child got mad earlier this year and shredded a solid oak rocking chair to splinters. Not typical behavior. Even for this child, honestly, not all that typical behavior, but the range of frustration and being able to cope with whatever the perceived issue was in the moment fell down in this area. At the same time, the academic needs are up in this area. And the ability to regulate between those two is probably over here somewhere in this area. So we don't get a ton of these kids. You know, the other Matt talked to us last week about how, you know, we estimate that these guys make up somewhere between 1% and 3% of the population. We know we have about 2.1% of identified twice exceptional students in MCP, which for us means that we have somewhere around the neighborhood of about 1,700 students that we know for sure have been identified in some way as twice exceptional. And I can tell you that's a vast underrepresentation, just based on the kids I know I have that don't come up when I pull my unofficial or official numbers, however you want to look at it. But these are kids who have these significant strengths, significant weaknesses. And then the other thing we don't want to underplay are, you know, they have some typical behaviors in here as well, but often those kind of get lost in the wash. And so we don't want to forget those areas of strength for our students as well. For a second, because I do like this, but we are actually going to switch gears real quick. I am thinking, sorry. Okay, cool. So for those of you who are watching the recording, you guys missed the whole thing earlier where there was an issue with my ADHD medicine and I'm not on it. And so you're getting to experience my brain full on tonight. So yeah, so I'm going to take us into this one on asynchronous development. So asynchronous development, on the surface, pretty easy to explain. It means that we have somebody who is out of sync with themselves. Asynchronous development is not atypical. All kids are a little bit asynchronous. But, you know, overall, if you think about, let's just say, a 3-year-old child, if I have a 3-year-old child who's in sync, sometimes are they, you know, refusing to put on their own socks and throwing themselves on the floor and crying like they are? Absolutely. Sometimes do they say the most gut-wrenching truths you ever in your life heard? Absolutely. That's what 3-year-olds do. They hurt your feelings because they're 3 and they can. And they don't mean to, they're 3. They read books, you know, or have books read to them that are typical. They tend to like mostly bland foods, mostly in the form of like dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets. They're 3 years old. They do what we expect them to do. When we're talking about an asynchronous gifted child, we might be talking about a child who, say, is 5 years old, but is able to say, discuss the problems of world hunger with you in a moment, and then the next moment throw a tantrum because it's bedtime. So we're seeing those ranges. I am going to have us watch just a real quick little video here, and then, no, I lied. I'm going to take us into a different presentation. And Miriam, you should appreciate this because this is the one that I'm not doing for you guys now. So asynchronous development, we're going to skip over. Sorry, you're online, you guys don't get snacks. So actually what I actually want to do, I haven't done this in a while. Hopefully you guys have like some paper or notes or something in front of you. But I want to read to you a story. If I can figure out where I put the story. Aha, I know how this works. Well, of course you do. So I'm going to. All right, so I'm going to read a little story to you guys. This is the beginning of a short story called 11, and I really like it. So we're just going to listen for a moment. That's all you guys get to do. What they don't understand about birthdays, and what they never tell you, is that when you're 11, you're also 10 and 9 and 8 and 7 and 6 and 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. And when you wake up on your 11th birthday, you expect to feel 11, but you don't. You open up your eyes and everything is just like yesterday, only it's today. And you don't feel 11 at all. You still feel like you're 10, and you are, underneath the year that makes you 11. Like some days you might say something stupid, and there's one part of you that's still 10. Or maybe some days you need to sit on your mama's lap because you're scared, and that's the part of you that's 5. And maybe one day when you're all grown up and you need to cry like you're 3, and that's okay. That's what I tell mama when she's sad and needs to cry. Maybe she's feeling 3. Because the way you grow old is kind of like an onion or rings inside a tree trunk, or like my little wooden dolls that fit one inside each other, each year inside the next one. That's how being 11 years old is. You don't feel 11, not right away. It takes a few days, weeks, even sometimes months before you say 11 when they ask you. And you don't feel smart 11, not until you're almost 12. That's the way it is. Only today I wish I didn't have only 11 years old rattling inside me like pennies in a tin Band-Aid box. Today I wish I was 102 instead of 11, because if I was 102, I'd know what to say when Miss Prince put the red sweater on my desk. I would have known how to tell her it wasn't mine instead of just sitting there with that look on my face and nothing coming out of my mouth. So I really like that as an introduction for the idea of asynchronous development. And one of the things that I might ask people to do when they think about this is to think about how you might relate to Rachel's feeling about many ages all at once. So I want to give you guys just a minute or so to throw in the chat something that you could relate to about this idea of many ages all at once. And I have some guiding questions in there, like how many ages have you felt in the last 24 hours? Do you ever feel like ages you aren't? Or how, maybe not a specific age, but how do these feelings impact your actions? Makes me feel like I need to change the way I act and things I say. felt about 4 different ages in the last 24 hours. I have to stop myself and think before I doing and saying something I regret. Yeah, I should get that on a t-shirt personally. Overwhelmed by mom and work life. Like I'm not a full grown adult. Older I get, I feel more different ages I feel. Often find myself missing more and more of younger, free, responsibility-free ages, yes. Glad I'm so with you. I was almost late to work this morning because I just literally did not want to get out of bed. Oh, happy birthday, Diana. Wondering if age is just a number. Those are great guys. Oh, and 11 is still part of some parts of the curriculum to kind of work in. So thank you guys for that. Oh, no, there we go. So this is one that I wrote last year as my own quick write. And I said, today I don't feel my age at all. I woke up coughing really badly. All I wanted was my mom. I wanted to be 5 years old and crawl back into her bed and have her rub my back until I stopped hurting. I had bronchitis at the time. Later, I sat on the couch and my back creaked. Who said that every time I get off the couch, I feel 97? Is this how someone in their 40s is supposed to feel? My daughter has so much energy. I want to be young like she is, but not 8, maybe like 27 with energy and common sense. But I mean, I went to like my last one here. Oh, both inside out of the classroom, both in and out of touch with current students and teachers in the classroom. I feel like I'm supposed to be an adult, but definitely on the lookout for an adultier adult to be in charge. That is one of my students sent me that once when I was still in the classroom where they were like, "Are you ever look for an adultier adult? You're the most adult person I can find right now, but I'm not sure you're a real adult." And I was like, that might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Um, yeah, this was back in December. I'm 43 now. I don't know how 43 is supposed to feel. And so that's really just kind of like that's the start for that asynchronous development idea, right? Like as adults, we know what it's like to feel all sorts of different ages because we've been a bunch of different ages. But what we want to think about are kids who are maybe only 2, 3, 5, 10, who also feel a whole lot of different ages, but what they lack is the life experience to go with those ages. Um, so we would talk a little bit about, we know our kids need more social skills instruction than ever. The pandemic did huge amounts of damage to our kids when it comes to being social. Our small ones missed out on preschool and opportunities to be straight up social. Our older ones lost skills that they had. We all lost skills that we had. I mean, I know that my social skills have not completely recovered from where they were pre-pandemic, and they were a mess before the pandemic. So I can't imagine how much of a mess they are now some days, but at least I have the wherewithal to understand that about myself. Our students don't. And so we have kids who are coming in with these greater social skills needs, and then they're also being paired up with kids who also have impairment with their areas of social skills and with those areas of need. So we have kids who are who have these social struggles mixing with kids who have social struggles. And for us as adults, it's making things crazier than ever. So I'm gonna have us again watch a quick little video. A lot of videos tonight.
This is Elisa. She's 6 and she has some challenges. Her handwriting is below grade level and she can't tolerate loud noises, so that being in the cafeteria sends her into a full panic. These things make Elisa's brain feel like this. Ah! But Elisa is good at a few things too. One of them is astronomy. She's so good at it that she could read and understand mass market astronomy books like Stephen Hawking's Universe in a Nutshell when she was 5. Astronomy makes Elisa's brain happy. It makes her whole being happy. Yippee! More, 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 more.
Elisa is many ages at once, 6 years old chronologically, but 20 when she reads astronomy, 8 years old socially, and 4 when she tries to write neatly. She is asynchronous. Some people call this being a high potential child, but her potential will never be realized if her needs aren't met. And those needs are extreme. Her parents have a hard time keeping up with her, and they have no money to buy her special resources. Elisa is self-driven to learn, constantly, rapidly, and deeply. She has a great many interests, but no need or tolerance for repetition. What this looks like in school may be surprising. Elisa is often lost in thought and slow to answer questions. It's not because she doesn't know the answer, but because she's too busy considering all the possible answers. As a result, Elisa's teacher thinks she isn't very smart.
I actually really want to go back for a moment on here. So the question is, Elisa, can you tell me how many limes there are? And if you can't see, there's 6 little green circles on the board. And Elisa says, let's see, limes, they look like peas, except for the lima bean over there. Does she know that limes have no seeds? And then the next bubble says, okay, limes, 2 groups of 3. Does she want 3 plus 3 or 3 times 2? Both are 6. That's too easy. And then the next one says, maybe she wanted 3 times 3. That's 9. Or 3 to the 3rd power. That's 3 cubed. That's 27. And 2 plus 7 equals 9. Maybe she wants to know what she can make with so many limes. Limeade, 2 glasses of it. Guacamole with avocados. Actually, it's how my brain feels today. And then the teacher over here says, Elisa, oh, we missed that last one. It says, Sai, Devin, do you know? So this is kind of like that silent piece of what's going on in her head, but what it looks like to the teacher is silence followed by because she's trying to process her way through all this.
Grade level in most subjects, her school can't or won't make any changes to accommodate her intellectual needs. And this is both damaging and bewildering for Elisa. Every other child in her school is having his or her needs met, but not her. And on top of it all, without the daily challenge of getting the brain food she needs constantly, Elisa isn't learning basic good work habits like diligence and persistence. There are thousands of kids like Elisa in the United States, kids who are many ages at once. They are as diverse as the population of our country. A surprising number of these kids have learning disabilities like dyslexia, ADHD, or autism spectrum disorder, even though their IQs are very, very high. Their needs are even more extraordinary. Few schools and families can meet them without outside assistance.
Okay, we're going to skip the next part because that's a commercial. And then this is another article I have linked in here where we talk about Leo, who's 3 years old and obsessed with dinosaurs, as most 3-year-olds are. What we learn about Leo through this story is that, I'm sorry, I'm going to change that because that little dinosaur is driving me bonkers. What we learn about Leo through his story is that one day when he was about 3.5, 4 years old, he's crying at bedtime. And he's crying at bedtime because he says to his mom, did you know all the dinosaurs are extinct? If you've had kids, you know this is like traumatic when they find out they're never going to see a dinosaur. And Leo says, but mommy, scientists don't know why they're extinct. They just suddenly went happen. And what happens if something happens to us and the entire human race goes extinct too? What's going to happen then? Because scientists don't know why it happened. It could happen to us. Being sad that the dinosaurs extinct is typical for a 3-year-old. Fearing mass human extinction is not typical for a 3-year-old. And so going through this process with her child, you know, where he has the capacity to understand mass human extinction, but he doesn't have the emotional wherewithal to process those feelings, is part of what being asynchronous is. I remember my best friend's son used to have meltdowns when he learned about the plastic ocean crisis. And it started because he was really into, I think it was whales. And then he learned about whales eating plastic and dying. And he had this massive existential crisis, and he was 4. And it was leading to behavior problems in school, because how could you possibly go to school and learn math, which is so easy anyway, according to him, when like whales are dying in the ocean and his peers are like, you know, they're kindergartners. It's not registering with them that why this is such a problem. And when we learn about these things, about these asynchronous kids, what we find out, that's why I call this asynchronous math, because kids are out of sync. They're not just out of sync when they're little. So Leo's mom at the time she writes this article tells us chronologically he's about 7, which means, and intellectually he's around 14, and socially he's about 5. But we also know that those brains don't synchronize until they get older. And the more neurodiverse you are, the more things going on in your brain, the longer it takes for you to synchronize, which means that when he's in 2nd grade at the age of 7, he's intellectually a 14-year-old. Socially, he's a 5-year-old. Elementary school teachers, I know you can kind of feel this, but then he goes to middle school. And so he starts middle school at 11, but intellectually he's 18. Not a lot of kids in middle school are ready to have the same conversations that 18-year-olds are having, but then socially he's also 9. So he's really behind his peers. And at a time where they're, getting into whatever social things it is middle schoolers get into, he's not ready for that. But he also intellectually doesn't have a place to talk to his peers as well. And when he leaves middle school and goes to high school, well, now he's chronologically 14. He's where he was intellectually when he was 7. But intellectually now he's 21. He's ready for those really high level concepts. But then socially he's 12. He's not necessarily even ready to start in high school at this point. And as somebody who was 13 when they started high school and 17 when they started college, but socially was at least 5 years behind my peers, this is overwhelming. And you get bombarded with all of these things and people who understand, social nuances and just things that just don't have any registration with you until when you realize that you don't get it, and then you feel really out of whack. So not only are you feeling out of whack intellectually because nobody has the same interests as you, but you're out of whack socially because everyone is so much more advanced than you that you start to feel like you really start to feel like something's wrong with you. And it's a hard thing to realize. And then to know that even at this point, when he's 14 years old, he's still got another lifetime practically until his brain synchronizes with itself. And so Elisa was the same thing, right? They told us chronologically she's 5, intellectually she's 21, which means that she's practically 30 by the time, and intellectually by the time she starts high school. And that's a hard thing again for our teachers to deal with. And she's one who's only a little bit behind socially from where her chronological age is, but she's going to potentially fall further behind because she doesn't have anyone to have intellectual peers with, intellectual discussions with, and that's a big part of school. And it's hard to have those things. And so what she's actually in danger of is trying to hide some of her intellectual strength in order to appear normal to her peers. So where I'm going to have us at tonight, like I said, I still have Matt's presentation, which let me go check YouTube and see if it's up yet. Yay! I will get that posted onto the Canvas page for you guys. So yeah, so what I want to actually do is have us go ahead and break there. We will pick up with more of the social emotional development pieces next week for class. And Dr. Matt's presentation, both Dr. Matt's presentations will be up. But the one that you want to watch for the second half of this class is the one that's called Riding Out the Storm. It's listed as where's my link? Get shareable link. There we go. I'm going to pop it here for you guys, but I'm also going to put it in the classroom. So it's called SA-106 March 3rd, 2025 B. This part will be called Part A, just so you can keep it separate. And the assignment is posted. And let me, while I'm sitting here, so you know I did it for reals, edit assignment, more options. Okay, so it should be up there. It's called the Dr. Matt Z video. The YouTube URL is up there, and the There we go. And the Google Doc is up there. Yes, this time I do want you to turn the capture sheet in. I know typically when I give you guys a capture sheet, I don't need it turned in. It's just for your own note-taking piece, but for this one, I would like it since we're not going to be able to do that session live. Anybody have any questions for us tonight or generally good to go?
So the capture sheet is in the posted in Moodle assignment?
Yes, so I posted an assignment. Let me just, where did it go? Come on. Ah, okay, here it is. So what I did, if you go to the classroom, is it's under assignments and it's called Dr. Matt Video. It is not pretty. I've got a link to the video and I've got a link to the capture sheet that should force you to make a copy. And like I said, it's super straightforward. 3 things that Dr. Matt says that are somewhat interesting, some type of reaction you had to what he said. I will tell you, I've already heard 3 things in there that I've changed the presentation I'm doing on Friday to add these into. Then 1 sentence of I used to think, but now I think. So using the frame, something that has changed your thinking. And then now what? Just a couple sentences as a result of this new learning. How might it change your daily practice? So, like I said, it's very straightforward. If you're coming out of this, your now what is that you have questions. Matt said he is happy to answer any questions that people have. He's got his email in there, so you could email him directly, or if you want to post them, maybe I'll put a discussion board of like questions for Dr. Matt and I'll send it to him to see if to ask him to answer those. But he did tell me that he's happy to answer questions that people have, and he always throws his email address in the end. I think it's just Dr. Matt or Dr. Matt Zakreski at Gmail. But that should be on there. All assignments are due by April 30th. Like I'm, especially when I'm throwing it on you guys at the last second, I just need everything done in time for me to get it graded so that everybody who wants to get their credits before the end of year research deadline can get them. You should be able to upload it to the, did I mess that up? You know what you actually can do? You can leave, there is a thing to link to Google Drive, or you could also copy paste your link to your copied answer sheet to me and post that in there. Just make sure I can actually see it. Leave student view. But yeah, you're better. Don't get it lost in my email. Lots of things get lost in my email. Or, I mean, you can also just copy and paste it into a text box, like whatever's easiest for you, as long as I can see your responses. That's all I need. Anything else, guys?
Thank you for powering through.
Oh, thank you. Thank you guys for being flexible with me.